Well, Hannah, welcome to the Only Connect Bonded podcast.
Hello.
It's a great pleasure to have you on today. For the benefit of the audience, do you just want to explain a little bit about yourself and your sort of what you do in a professional capacity?
Other than being your wife.
I was wondering who was going to mention that first.
I think it's the elephant in the room. We need to get it out of the way. But no, it's really cool to be here and be part of the your new podcast series. And yeah, I guess my journey is quite different to maybe quite a few of the other people you'll be interviewing. So hopefully I'll be able to add something a little bit different for your listeners.
So we're going to touch on today a bit of your sort of career journey. Being the Only Connect podcast, there's a running theme of connection and how that's played a part in the guest's sort of career journey, if there is a point where you felt like disconnected or when you realised the importance of connection. And I think, our discussions, being sort of husband and wife, as well as, we're going to come on to how you've supported Bonded as well in a more professional capacity. I'm very aware that connection has played a role in the different stages of that sort of professional journey so far. So to start with, should we sort of take a step back, go back to the beginning of that career, and you ran a charity called The Key for it's about 16, 17 years as CEO from the start, 25 years old.
That's right.
Perhaps for our listeners, share a little bit about that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, so it was quite full on, quite early on in my career to have the opportunity to be a CEO of a charity at age 25. And it sounds like bonkers now thinking about it. But I guess even like a little step back before that, like my, I'm a sort of sciencey, geeky type person. That was all the stuff I did combined sciences at university. So I was interested in science and facts and all that kind of stuff. But actually the part of my degree that I enjoyed the most was like an education module, and it was where I got to go out to Wallsend Middle School, and I was working with a class of young people and was helping them create costumes for their Christmas play, and I absolutely loved it. And it was at that point, I knew that it was that connection with people, and in particular people that I knew that I could help. I just got a real buzz off it, and so even though my sort of background is more sciencey and technical, actually it was the human connection part that really drove me forward, and that's where I found my real passion. So when I started the job at The Key, I'd come from a year running another non-profit actually that was around helping SMEs to use data to improve the way that they ran their businesses, and The Key was a charity that was internally needed an awful lot of improvements, but actually had an intervention that engaged young people like nothing I've ever seen before. And the very heart of what The Key did in terms of helping young people to change their lives was around human connection. We had about 750 odd youth facilitators, and these people were delivering our program with young people, and it was that trusted relationship between them and the young people that they were supporting that unlocked all their ability to inspire them, to help them to create change in their lives and build a growth mindset, essentially.
At the source of that, in terms of those young people entering into that programme, there was connection there, wasn't there? It was that element of trust between the young people, or the group of young people, with their facilitator, as it was termed, which may be like a youth worker or community leader. So that was intrinsic, really, to the whole framework that people would find out about The Key. It might be the facilitator, like the trusted advisor. They would communicate with the group, and I'm sure the parents or guardians of those individuals, if they were not adults, and that's how they would enter the programme. And then there was a strong element of being a charity requiring funding and to run, really, and there was at the other end of the scale there was a fundraising strategy that was very much led through sort of trust and connection and relationships as well.
Yeah, I mean, the connection was like a thread that ran through the whole organisation, and I believe that it's the human connection in all of these different parts of the organisation that actually enable you to create change. And so for the young people, it was that relationship with their youth worker, but it was also their relationship with each other. So, they would come together as a group, they would have to decide a name between each other, they would have to decide what it is they wanted to do, and all of those skills that we helped them to develop was due to that interaction with each other, resolving conflict, solving problems, making decisions, and to do that as a group is a really unique opportunity to develop those sort of communication skills and connection skills in a way like no other. But yes, you're right with the finding funding to run your charity is like the biggest problem that most charities face. And we, and me in particular, I was able to build really long-term trusted relationships with funders. And that's because I was honest. I would tell them what the warts were. I was telling them, I'd got this plan. I thought it was going to work like this and it didn't. This is what happened. But, we're going to try this instead. And that respect and that trust and that honesty meant that we had funders that there's still funders now there's one St James Place Foundation. They started working with the Key in 2012, part of the London Olympics, and they are still today funding the Key, and all of that's due to relationships. So yeah, it's been a golden thread throughout the whole thing. And the Key was also a membership organisation, so we had to build relationships with all of those hundreds of facilitators and help them to build relationships with each other. So they would sit on each other's like Dragon's Den style panels, and they would support each other in their work, share what was effective and what they were struggling with, and yeah, that was the sort of the lifeblood of the whole thing.
In terms of those sort of trusted relationships that you built with the funding bodies as well, data played quite an intrinsic role in that.
Yeah.
And in many ways that was towards the beginning of your professional relationship with data and understanding the power that data can have, particularly for a socially purpose-driven organisation. Do you want to explain a little bit more about how data played a role?
Yeah, this is where I got to draw on then that inner geek part of me as well. So the Key, I think we were one of the first charities in the UK to have a data strategy. We had a data strategy in 2008, and we were talking about impact and outcomes when that wasn't even in the lexicon of funders. And the reason why obviously my role before that was around the SME sector, and I was seeing how the private sector was using data to help them become more effective and efficient as an organisation. But it's a challenge doing that in a charity space, because you're not there to generate a profit, you're there to generate impact. And impact is a much harder thing to sort of calculate and understand than pounds and pence. But nevertheless, it's a really important endeavour, and one that has served me really well, to the current day, is being able to use data to sort of fuel your curiosity about, well, what is it that we're doing with the young people that is so effective? How are we creating impact, and how can we optimise our resources around that? And I guess to your point in terms of the relationships with the funders, most charities, the way that they are best able to communicate how they create impact is through telling stories, case studies, and stories that touch your heart as well. But when you're able to underpin those stories with solid, robust data, you tell us a story about an individual that you've supported, and then you're like, we help 400 people a month like Maureen. And suddenly, those stories bring on a whole new life to them that's really compelling for people who want to support your mission and help you in the work that you do. So data, for me, has all sorts of different ways in which it can support charities. And at the core of it, I talk a lot to charities about curiosity, really. So using the data not to just tell you what's happening. It's not just because the data says it doesn't mean it is. It helps to shine a light on questions that you should be asking of your intervention, of your organisation. It helps you to inform your decisions and where you should be paying your applying your attention, as opposed to just blindly, okay, well, that's what the data says, so that's what it is, and that's what we need, and that's what we need to do moving forward, because it's more complex than that in social space.
So what I'm taking as sort of broad principles, that's sort of emotive storytelling to connect effectively with the funders, integrating that with data to back it up, and ultimately building trust. And you mentioned earlier around that layer of authenticity as well. You always were transparent and told the truth, the good stuff as well as the stuff that wasn't going so well.
I believe the way that the sector is funded is broken, and I'm on a mission to try and solve that. And a big part of that is around the power dynamics between the funders and the charities. And actually, neither side really want those power dynamics in place. But, we've got money, we can give it out, we want your money. And then, that sort of creates this kind of discourse, which is often, the charities end up telling the funders what they think the funders want to hear. And the funders are hearing what they want to hear and think that that's the truth. But actually, it creates a lot of untruths or biases in the charities will then collect data to try and show that what they're doing is effective, rather than to help them understand is what they're doing effective. And it's often very different type of information that you would look at and you would interrogate to try and prove that what you're doing is work. So I often talk about using the data and the information to understand and improve, as opposed to try and prove. And it's and so I believe that that once you've got that trust with the funder, you can then start to be much more open and transparent about what's actually happening. But and the funders are better off as a result. They can become more intelligent grant makers if they're working off more realistic, truthful information.
Fantastic. So fast forward through the key then. A very sort of successful 16, 17 years you were there, and more towards today, I guess. Do you want to explain a little bit about some of the work you do today? Because I know you have some board advisory roles for socially purpose-driven organisations, where connection plays a role as well, and then there's also Hannah Underwood as well.
Yeah.
Perhaps we'll start with the sort of board advisory roles that you have. So you're currently Vice Chair of Virgin Money Foundation?
That's right.
Fantastic. Pleased I got that right. And that's an organisation that is currently focused on building connections in communities, using community hubs within certain communities, so physical offline locations to build trusted connections within communities, with a specific goal to help sort of digital inclusivity.
That's right, yeah.
There's quite an interesting dynamic there around using sort of physical, interpersonal connection, face-to-face connection to build trust between the foundation and the community, and then building on that trust to communicate effectively and educate that community around utilising digital opportunities for their own personal progression, if you like. Do you want to explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's less about Virgin Money Foundation themselves having a presence in those communities. It's about, so Virgin Money Foundation, the mission is around trying to tackle digital exclusion, and there's a lot of interest in this topic because it's a leveler. There's a poverty premium attached to people who aren't able to be digitally included. And some people don't want to be, but it's often, the more and more that the world moves online, those who aren't able to interact in that way are falling further behind. You need to book your GP appointments online now. If you want to get the best deal on your home insurance, you need to know how to use comparison sites. And all of these things create barriers to people who may be already experiencing poverty or having different types of vulnerabilities. And so in the majority of cases where funders and there's programs trying to tackle digital exclusion, they look at devices, connectivity, like data, and then skills and confidence. And they're all, they are like, the main 3 things that, people need in order to become more digitally included. But the difference for Virgin Money is that they've looked at the human connection element of it, and how can you reach those people who were totally turned off even by the whole concept of digital, like the word doesn't even engage them. And so they fund community anchor organisations. So they are organisations who already they're already situated in these places. They already have these built up these trusted relationships with individuals in their communities, and they may only be 1 or 2 steps ahead of the people they're trying to support in terms of like digital skills, but it's that relationship that unlocks the ability to provide that support. And you'll find that methodology is the same across an awful lot of ways in which you can create social change. And so, for example, Nancy, the chief exec, recently shared a story about an individual called Vincent who'd gone to one of the local food hubs that ran a community hubs that ran a food bank, and he was coming to collect a food parcel. And it's the first time he'd been there, and because of that trusted relationship, he had a conversation with an individual about the fact that his wife had been diagnosed with cancer. He was needing to purchase incontinence pads for her because of the current situation that she was in, and that was spent their whole food budget. But he knew that he was entitled to free pads through the NHS, but he had to apply for them online, and he didn't know how to do that. But that's like a really sensitive conversation to have, and unless you have that trust with that individual, you wouldn't disclose that information. But they were able to help him, provide him with the device, provide him with the support, and go, okay, well, this is how you apply for the, for these pads, and now that means that you've got more money, so you don't need to continue coming to the food bank to get food parcels. And it's about respect and dignity, and the human element that underpins even all of this, even though the intervention was ultimately a digital one. And I think like the whole sort of board roles, perhaps preempting a question of yours, but it's just whilst it's in my head, I think it's important to get out, is that so whilst I was, the CEO at the Key, and it was for a really long period of time, and although that role in itself, it was fantastic. I was constantly learning, but what I always did, even from a very early age, so actually from the age of 23, before I even got that job, I was on a part of the BBC Trust, which doesn't exist now, but it's like governance body for the BBC. And I always had these sorts of additional roles, governance type roles outside of my job, because it helped me to learn about different people in different environments working in different ways that I was able to bring back to the work that I did at the Key. And I would really encourage people to consider taking on trustee roles of charities, or especially if you've got digital skills, this is that's a skill set that's really lacking within the sector, because it's not just about what you're able to give back, it's actually what you're able to learn. And for me, actually my first job out of uni was with a charity called Common Purpose, and that organisation ran these sort of senior leadership programmes, and their whole thing was about connection now. And if I think about it, they were bringing together leaders from across different sectors, but all within a particular place. So they might be the leader of the council, might be chief execs of some of the private sector organisations, and etc. And they would together show them these are the problems, social and issues and economic issues in our area. And the idea was that if they connected as human beings throughout this programme, they could then begin to work together to solve some of those problems. And for me, as like a young'un just coming out of uni, and I saw all these like bigwigs, and then realised they are just human beings. They spill soup on their blouses, they miss their taxis, they leave their bags behind, and it was all like, and because I was able to connect with them as individuals, I was able to think, that I could do that, like that's possible. And I'm still have relationships now with individuals who took part in that programme, and that ability, I think we've talked about this in the past about, you know, to build this sort of network, diverse network of people around you is so powerful in whatever venture it is that then you want to take on.
So there's a few key points really I'd take from that. You know, that latter point around the importance of close and wider network essentially within business. I mean, I think, you know, that is something we believe in at Bonded, certainly, in terms of, you know, positioning ourselves in the right way, behaving in the right way, obviously aligned with values around integrity and honesty and, you know, doing good as well as doing great work. And, you know, building those relationships over time definitely is part of our approach, if you like. But I think the diversity within that is a great point as well. And having exposure, because often we operate in bubbles and you don't really realise it. But, you know, when I look at my sort of day by day, week by week, month by month, most of my time professionally is spent with certain types of people, having certain types of discussions about certain types of things. So, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. But in order to build on that, I think there's real value in, certainly from a leadership perspective, in having experience of interacting, engaging, connecting with different types of people from different walks of life, to be frank. You know, you mentioned the example there about in a professional capacity, you know, for a young person to be able to have that exposure. That's a great example. I was very fortunate growing up that through sport and other means, I had touch points with different types of people from different backgrounds and different sort of economic starts in life, shall we say. And that's something I always took forward, I think, versus the peers that I went to school with. That was a much wider exposure to society without being too grand, which set me up really well for coming to university, where obviously you meet lots of different people again. I think that diversity, looking outside your bubble, connecting with different people at whichever level is a positive thing and something I'll take from your experience as well, that you've referenced there. On that point, I suppose to segue into the social purpose strategy that you supported us with at Bonded, you know, we set about discussing, I guess, initially, a investment of time into, you know, supporting a cause and doing that in the right way. So we'll talk a little bit about the process we've been through, but in reference to the previous point, you know, that is sort of partly opening our eyes, looking outside of our bubble, looking at how we can utilise our time, but equally, if not more importantly, our expertise to support you know, people that are struggling essentially, which is you know, a great thing to do. So we went through a framework, didn't we? Which I'll let you explain a little bit about.
So just to like a little step back before I'll just talk about the process because it's like the process of creating that social purpose strategy, like how we did it is possibly even more important than what was produced at the end. But also just to take a little step back from that is like having run a charity for so long, and you know, it was always the goal to try and build relationships with the private sector, to build relationships with businesses. And there was often, you know, of all shapes and sizes, and wanting to access, yes, some money, because like needed money, but also like this expertise, the time and the expertise and the knowledge and the networks, you know, being able to use a room like this, you know, all those other resources. But often what businesses think is that, oh, well, we'll need to choose a new charity every year because we need to share it all around. Or, you know, this is a great team building opportunity for our team to go out and like paint, you know, dig up a garden or pick up some litter or paint a wall. And the charities go along with it often because what they really want to do is to build a relationship with that business, a long-term, meaningful, purposeful relationship that helps, is a win-win. But often what happens is that then the charities end up being like the provider of teamwork building opportunities for the business. and the business feels good about it, but actually in many cases it costs the charity, and they would have been better off paying for someone to paint a wall. Do you know what I mean? But it's that, again, it's this sort of unspoken thing about the power dynamics. And what we did when we looked at how Bonded could approach this is to think, this is about Bonded understanding and having buy-in from the whole organisation about what do the individuals here care about? What are the issues that are important to them? What resonates with the brand and the value of Bonded, and what's realistic in terms of like the size of your organisation and like what you have to offer. So actually your skills and your expertise and your other resources are just as valuable, if not more, than the money that you might be able to raise to give out. And so we went through a 3-stage process, bringing together the whole organisation to look at these different areas. You know, what are the things that connect with people? And it was very democratic, and there was lots of discussion and voting and presentations and research, and we ended up all aligning on loneliness as a problem. And I think what's really interesting about that as a topic, like just generally, as well as how it perfectly aligns with what Bonded's trying to do, is that loneliness is like this all-pervasive issue that no one talks about. You look at the data and the statistics about how people are impacted by loneliness, how the diversity of the people impacted by loneliness, and it's just everywhere. But it's not. There isn't a single charity in the North East that is focused just on loneliness. In fact, there's only one in the UK that we found that is focused just on loneliness. Yet it is a massive issue for individuals and for communities, and generally for social cohesion. And so, by shining a light on this issue through building relationships and connections with a small number of charities who are specifically trying to deal with this for a group, a target group of individuals, I just think I'm so excited about it. It feels like a really powerful opportunity to help people connect to that issue and to connect to each other. And the solution to loneliness is human connection. So it's just like this beautiful, like a success engine. I think the more that Bonded's able to help charities raise awareness of the issue, raise awareness of the causes, raise awareness of the impact, and raise awareness about the solutions.
And I think, you referenced some of the things we went through in that process, but it's the first time I've been through that process personally, and it involved writing things on post-it notes and sticking them on the window.
Lots of post-it notes.
So it was very interactive, and everyone had the opportunity and was encouraged to come forward with their views, and it was just a great process to go through. And I also think this topic of loneliness has come out, this cause of loneliness in young people as well. So and the reason for the young people is we've done the research off the back of that, or some initial research where the loneliest group age-wise in our society isn't the elderly, but it's actually 16 to 25-year-olds.
Who ironically are digitally the most connected.
Which we believe has strong influence over that loneliness. So it's almost like, full circle moments all the way through. And in a world where we operate that's very technology-driven, we believe, the most important aspect of that world is not forgetting the importance of human connection and prioritising that. So if we can, in a way, help that age group to also realise that, that's just a hugely positive thing, and just an unbelievable objective for us to have to make an impact, essentially, even if it just starts in this region. And we're partnering with Youth Focus North East. There's lots that we'll be doing over the course of the remainder of this year and next to help that cause and drive towards that objective. So very, very pleased about that.
And I think what you'll find, Steve, is it starts to unravel, well, not unravel, emerge, as it's being delivered. The Bonded will benefit in many ways from having a social purpose strategy and delivering it, like both in, you know, it'll improve engagement within your team. Like we've already seen a small team wanting to take this forward and like coming up with ideas. You know, it's a win-win relationship, and you'll see Youth Focus North East and the young people they're supporting will be benefiting, but there'll be benefits that will come back to Bonded. And it's important to capture what they are, because the more you understand what they are, then the more leverage that gives you to continue to invest in delivering something like the strategy that's been developed.
Fantastic. So in that instance, we used almost data in a way, it was like primary research from the team to identify the cause. We've built on that with some secondary research around identifying the age group, and that's sort of all connected together well, nicely. And it starts that journey really.
And we also have a theory of change, which we're going to be underpinning with a suite of metrics. And so that's where, you know, it'll be testing the assumptions about what is the social change that can be created by this strategy, but then also what is how does this feed back into Bonded as an organisation, and like stating what they are and trying to understand, you know, do those assumptions hold true, and like not leaving that value on the table will be a really important part of how the strategy is implemented.
Fantastic. And that fusion of data, connection, and connecting, you know, different groups of people that, you know, one can maybe benefit from the other or similar, actually plays through, you know, it's plays right through your career, as you explained, from you know, pre the key, but certainly through the key and beyond. That is, I can't end the podcast without mentioning, you know, How Might We,
Yes.
which is all about connecting socially purpose-driven organisations with data professionals to help evolve the data strategy and the data setup within those socially purpose-driven organisations,
Yeah.
so that they can be more effective. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, and so when I left the key, you know, we were punching well above our weight, and one of the reasons for that was because we had this data strategy and this data capability. And I'd also helped to co-found another charity back in 2011 or something called DataKind UK, and that's they're a charity themselves, and we connect data professionals to charities. What I was seeing, I then, when I left the key, I was doing data strategy consultancy, mainly for larger corporate foundations, and we realised that actually one of the problems is why they weren't able to sort of realise, deliver that strategy was because of their data capabilities. So it's like a technical engineering problem that needed to be solved. And so I went about developing a tech product that enabled that technical problem to be solved, put that out there into the sector. And yes, it did work, but actually the organisations, the charities wanted that human connection. They wanted to connect with data professionals and other people to help them go on that journey. So it wasn't a product that they wanted, it was a solution, and that solution included the connection. And so How Might We community is sort of pulling together these three important components, and it's only the interconnectivity of all of these things that will actually create the change. So there's like the data tooling, which is, you know, some people might fall asleep, but it's like that's the nuts and bolts as how an organisation can get all its data into one place and start to explore it without the requirement for data skills. And then there's supporting them with these relationships with data volunteers, but then creating these cross-sector relationships where the organisations like you're doing with your partnership with Youth Focus North East is to be able to then like bring together different ideas, different perspectives, different resources, different experiences around solving like critical how might we questions. So how might we reduce youth loneliness in the North East? How might we tackle child poverty in this particular area? And so it's that sort of curiosity, question-based approach with a cross-sector connections that's going to change. I want to change systems. I want to make a big change in the North East, and we'll only do that through system change, and that's only possible through collaboration across sectors. So yeah, nice little easy project.
So ambitious goals won't work unless there's true, effective, sort of authentic connection through, connecting those socially purpose-driven organisations with the requirement around data professionals and other individuals. So a nice point really to leave the podcast on and, watch this space in terms of how might we.
Yeah.
And bonded social purpose strategy.
Of course.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
No problem. What do you want for tea? No.